Contrary to the ads that you've seen in September and October, the Christmas season is just starting today. We are socialized by secular forces all around us to believe that Christmas is about the giving and receiving of material goods, that Christmas is about transactional exchanges of wrapped packages, rather than celebrating the real gift that we have been given, the birth of baby Jesus. But here, in this sanctuary, we have the power to dispel those marketing notions, because it is foundational and safe in this space for our gifts to be something other than what was purchased. On this first Sunday of Advent, here in this sanctuary, we begin the discernment of non-tangible gifts, gifts named as hope and joy and peace and love. As Christians, we are called to center our holiday and focus on the arrival of the Son of God. We are asked in this time to examine the faith in our hearts and see how it can play out in our lives. We are the believers that the Prince of Peace was born as a gift to humanity, and that the peace of Christ grows when we nurture hope for all. So on this first Sunday of Advent, like any 5-year-old child on Christmas morning, I'm going to jump right to the gifts. I'm going to zoom right past that Christmas story with the arrival of the wise men. They arrived with gifts suited for a king, from a king: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. You know, the gifts that every first-time parent desires. In a moment, when we read Matthew, I ask you to listen to the motives of the gifts delivered. These wise men could more aptly be called agents or spies of Herod's. They're not the kind old men that were out there out of the goodness of their hearts. Their travel was the genesis of Herod's nefarious motives. They were arriving in Bethlehem to suss out the suspicious prophecy of a new leader, a child nonetheless. They were to follow that star of destiny and report back to Herod about who and what this possible threat was. But behold, when they laid eyes on that holy babe, their lives changed course. Seeing baby Jesus was their epiphany. The gift givers of gold and frankincense and myrrh became the receivers of yet greater gifts, not found in treasure boxes, but in the non-tangibles of joy and hope and peace and love found in a tiny babe.
A reading from Matthew, chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Amen.
Please pray with me. Mother of our Lord and all of us, bring our ears and our hearts to a place where we can hear you calling our gifts into service. Be beside us as we discern the season your call that you have seated within us at our infancy. Nurture us and grow our gifts to serve you and the world in which we live. Amen. This morning at 7 a.m., I had an epiphany, and it's one that called me to break the rules. So I've been preparing a sermon for days and days and days this week, how to weave in the Advent season and also the sentiment of my journey here. And then it came to me. Almost 10 years ago to the day, I offered you a story, a testimony that was the best gift of hope that I know. And I'm going to share it with you again. Some of you have heard it, many of you have not. But the importance of sharing it again is that it's where my faith journey started. It was the beginning of my beginning. It's the beginning of my ending. I've come full circle. You all have shared so many gifts with me. And while it's human nature and our inclination to take gifts and hold them this tightly because we don't want to lose control, the sermon that I had prepared was about a lesson in letting go. That this is where the gifts unfold. This is where gifts grow. And so I'm going to share this story with you with open palms, that this story and your faith grow with it. Because there are never really any endings, just new beginnings. And I hope that whatever it is that you are clinging to so tightly, to hold on to control in this season of Advent, in this darkness, take that control, take that tight fist, that darkness, and open it to the light. That has been my faith journey. That has been what is changing in my life. And it's the gift that I can give back to you. The times that I have opened my palms and let God work and been vulnerable into the unknown is when the magic of my God self has happened. It doesn't happen here when it's all the things that I want. It happens here when I let God do what God needs me to do, what God has called me to do. This is my gift to you this Advent. Walk forward, open to all the possibilities, open to the mystery that faith holds. God is with you in your endings and in your beginnings. Christmas has always been a favorite holiday for my family, and my mom was the ringleader of this excitement. As a mother, I am now finding out just how much work goes into creating the magic. But oh, the joy it brings. Christmas is everything that my mom loved. Glitz, tradition, family, friends, chocolates, caramels, music, surprises, and Jesus. As small children, we were allowed to help set up the nativity manger. And as an educator, she valued hands-on learning, even at the expense of baby Jesus being carted off to another stable while the shepherds weren't watching. But somehow, baby Jesus always made it back to his manger. And when I was old enough to understand the value of a dollar, she taught me the intoxicating effects of sale shopping. The more red slashes through a price tag, the greater the need to have it. The ugliest things in the world can look great at the right price. So often a retailer's purge is a shopper's binge, and that allowed for year-round shopping for my mother. This is how the gift closet evolved. There was always something for someone on any occasion. As typical of many households on Christmas morning, the aftermath of wrapping paper covered our living room floor by about 6:30 a.m. The photos and pajamas had us encased with bedhead. Phone calls to relatives were made, and yet another pot of coffee followed for my parents. There were oranges from our stockings made into the fruit salad with marshmallows and bright red maraschino cherries. And then we had a full day of playing with our toys and trying on new clothes. Hours after the early morning frenzy, my brother, Matt, and I would be engrossed with our new toys, only to be startled by my mom, who would jump up and said, "Oh, I have one more thing." And she would abruptly disappear, usually to the gift closet or some unknown, undisclosed hiding spot, to reappear moments later with one more gift. What else did she wrap and forget about? What got organized right out of sight? I bet she bought something in July that she just remembered. Her one more thing became an anticipated tradition. Now, I wrote this many years ago, but 2 years ago when she was sick. The long-running joys of our traditional Christmas had changed dramatically. Our ringleader, my mother, was struggling for her life and to be here for one more Christmas. It was the holiday that she loved so dearly. My mom's breast cancer from 14 years ago was back for the third and final time. The cancer had spread to her bones. It was eating her ribs and her spine and invaded her liver. We had September. Many of those days were spent in Madison at the University Hospital, day after day filled with tests and multiple attempts for the right pain medication and news that she just had months to live. One evening, she suddenly fell into a deep sleep while reading a card from a friend. And she had a fierce grip on that card, but she was not present. My brother and I were bouncing off the walls. It was as if the barometer had plummeted. We were coming out of our skin, and my brother changed his travel plans because something was not right. We thought she might die right then and there that night. But she awoken and spoke with a clarity that she hadn't for days and said, "I just had a conversation with God, and I have something to say about this." And I asked her if she knew when this was going to happen. And she said, during the holidays. It was profound. We had October together, and she was able to sit outside briefly and draw faces on the kids' Halloween pumpkins. Her friends, really angels in the making, built her a 10-foot tall grapevine Christmas tree in the yard outside the house, between the house and the lake. There were no fewer than 2,500 sparkling white lights, woven through the vines and the fall foliage, trimmed with the masterpiece. At the top, there was this eccentric plum of prairie grass that would dance in the breeze. That tree was visible from all angles of her resting spots. When people came to visit and weren't sure what to say, the tree was likely a topic. When our thoughts were vacuous, it was something to stare at. Months later, when my dad, brother, and I were all up at all hours of the night, physically and emotionally exhausted, we would prepare the next dose of medicine by the light cast from the tree. That tree kept the light burning for our aching hearts. We had November together. My parents came down to Glen for Thanksgiving, and we had a hospital bed put in the den and dinner catered. My brother's mother-in-law just passed away the week before. There was a dense gray fog hovering. My mom was so sick from the medication and in so much pain. But I tried to entice her with the things that she loved and engage her with holiday decorating. It was always her forte, wanting so badly for this time together to just be normal. She obliged, but there was no stamina. We had a family picture taken by my decorated staircase with my brother, his family, my family, and our parents. There we were, captured together for the last time, uncertain of how the days would unfold ahead of us. And then we had December. This was unlike any other December that we had ever experienced. We were told there were only weeks left. The tradition of making caramel corn and holiday parties and the chaos of wrapping gifts were just distant memories. Instead, there were casseroles from friends and neighbors and small gatherings of my parents' closest friends to hug. And that precious gift of time together was changing into moments. The gifts of this season were not wrapped, but rather life-altering gestures of love and grace and friendship and faith. The friends that cared for us were such amazing people. They anticipated our needs when we could not articulate them. They carried us with prayers and food, memories that brought levity and laughter when we needed it the most. These gifts were given to my family, were tributes to my parents' charismatic, generous, humble, and endearing friendships over the last 35 years in a community. They lived their lives as partners to each other and pillars in the community. They were, without exaggeration, friends to everyone. My brother lived in Atlanta, but was able to join us in Oshkosh with our parents frequently because of his job, flexibility, and empathetic wife. I was able to be in Oshkosh frequently because of the kindness and love of my husband, in-laws, friends, and neighbors that took over the responsibility of caring for 3 young children. Our Oshkosh family of 4, my mom, my dad, my brother, and I, had days alone together for the first time in close to 20 years. My mom loved having her 2 babies all to herself. What happened in those last days of December was sacred. We watched and interacted with my mom while she was straddling this world and the next. She was gracious and willing to let us care for her, and she allowed others to visit her while she was on that journey to full grace. She knew after a lifetime of giving, it was so important to let others give to her and to us. She knew that giving makes people feel better. She knew people so well. My parents' pastor came over to visit us several times, and she would lead us in prayer and guide us when we weren't sure what to pray for. Various combinations of family members and friends prayed on bended knee beside my mom's bed, often reciting the Lord's Prayer out loud. Our emotional voices resonated in each other's ears. This is when my mom pinched her fingers together and placed them in the palm of my hand and said to me, "For you." "What is it?" "A good Lord's wish." "Thank you, Mom." And I kissed her cheek. A few days later, or it could have been hours, for the concept of time eluded us, my aunt was in the bedroom visiting. And I was sitting on the bed, and again, my mother pinched her fingers together, and for a second time, pecked them in the palm of my hand. And she said, "Rings and pearls, don't lose them." "Thank you, Mom, I won't lose them." She gave me one more gift that Christmas, with her fingers pinched in the palm of my hand. The last gift she gave me was a candy bar. Since we were little kids, my mom said all she wanted at her funeral were white daisies and Snicker bars. And with these gestures, I knew she was ready to leave us. Those of you who have had the privilege of caring for someone on their deathbed know the miracles and the mysteries of dying. Our special caregiver, Roxy, would console me by saying, "Death is a miracle. It's just God reclaiming you from your birth." We had many moments that we thought might be her last. So many anxious nights. The three of us, my brother, Dad, and myself, lying on our bedroom floor like little puppies, and we were waking with every stir that she made, or sometimes didn't make. We were told it could be any time. Hospice caregivers, friends, and our pastors were amazed at her tenacity to still be here. They would say, "There's a saying that you leave the world the same way you came into it." And she was a fighting preemie, and now a cancer fighter, looking to be here for Christmas. It was only by God's grace and the prayers of others and the angels that were carrying me that I found the courage to say goodbye to my mother. I knew she wanted to be alone with my dad when she died. It was the way the family started, and it was only days away from their 40th wedding anniversary. Christmas is about children. And I knew she wanted me to be back with mine and Glen Ellyn. So late in the evening on December 23rd of 2005, I said goodbye to my mother. She tried to talk, but her voice was inaudible. But in our lopsided dialogue, I made a request. She had told me that years ago when her father died, actually dropped dead of a heart attack at the dining room table. She was only 14 years old. Days later, the chandelier lights that had never blinked before did. She had always thought that that was her dad communicating with her. And nearly 45 years later, after her mother died, she was standing in my dining room, and the chandelier lights blinked. I was standing next to her, and she said, "Has that ever happened before?" "No, never," I answered. She smiled and said, "That's my mom. She's in heaven." That last night, I kissed my mother, and I said, "Blink the lights when you get to heaven." And I left. She lived for Christmas, all of her life and one more day. This was a deal that she negotiated between God on that September night in Madison. God held up her end of the deal. December 26th, my mom died with my dad by her side. She had a glorious smile on her face, awed by the glory of God's kingdom and the bounty of heaven. I returned to Oshkosh after she had died and was responsible for the funeral arrangements and picking out her clothes. Alone in her room, where we had lived in a cocoon for the month of December, I talked to her, and I blew a kiss to her grapevine Christmas tree. It was surreal standing there, alone, in that space where she was just here. My mother was in heaven, looking down on me right then, and continues to. That tree that burned so brightly during our last days and hours together fulfilled my request and God's promise to all of us. One strand of lights at the bottom of the tree started blinking rapidly. It paused to capture my attention and blinked again, and it paused, and it blinked again and again and again and again until they finally burned out. I yelled for my dad, and he came running into the room. I said, "Look, remember what I asked Mom to do? She's okay. She's in heaven." There was amazement, sobs, laughter, and hugs. For she continued two special family traditions, blinking the lights, and saying, "Here's one more gift." A gift she shared with me, and a gift I share with you. The gift of hope and absolute faith with a blinking, glowing exclamation point. That, my friends, is the gift of hope that's offered in every Christmas. Amen.